Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into how milk is quite literally a custom-engineered marvel of nature. We're going to zoom way out to look at species across the planet, and then zoom all the way in to the microscopic physical chemistry just to understand exactly what makes this biological elixir tick.
Our roadmap for today is pretty straightforward. We'll start with the animal kingdom's dairy, move into the anatomy of a drop, look at the major constituents and their roles, and finish up with fractionation and modern uses. All right, part 1. The animal kingdom's dairy.
Let's look at how different species uniquely adapt this fluid for the sheer survival of their young. And what's really fascinating here is the absolute evolutionary engineering at play. Milk is designed for one primary job, right? Meeting the complete nutritional requirements of a newborn. Take human milk, for example. It sits at around 1% protein, and it takes a human baby roughly 120 to 180 days to double its birth weight. But then, contrast that with a polar bear. Polar bear milk packs an astonishing 10.9% protein and over 33% fat. Why? Well, their cubs need to double their birth weight in just 2 to 4 days just to survive that brutal Arctic climate. It's purely functional fuel.
So the crucial takeaway here is that while cow milk, bovine milk, is our commercial standard globally, scientifically speaking, it's actually surprising how different it is from our own. Human and bovine milks sit at practically opposite ends of the spectrum when we analyze these characterized milks. Human milk is significantly lower in protein and ash, but way higher in lactose compared to bovine milk. We've essentially just adopted the cow as our primary dairy provider because of scale and our agricultural history, not because it's some perfect mimic of human biology.
Moving on to part 2, anatomy of a drop. If we zoom in really closely, you realize milk isn't just a uniform, simple liquid at all. It's a highly complex physicochemical system. Let's set a baseline using average cow's milk. You'll notice it's overwhelmingly water, about 86.6%. Water is basically just the medium. But that remaining chunk, the total solids, which includes your fat, lactose, protein, and ash, that is where the true chemical magic happens. And those solids, they don't just float around randomly, they exist in highly specific states.
Which brings us to the 3 phases of milk. Honestly, think of a single drop of milk as a 3-ring circus of chemistry happening all at the exact same time. First up, you have a true solution. This is where your lactose, vitamins, and some minerals are completely dissolved in the water. Second, you've got a colloid dispersion. This is where your larger proteins are suspended. They aren't dissolved, but rather floating around as large aggregates. And third, you have an emulsion, where the lipids or milk fats are emulsified as these tiny, microscopic globules. It's literally 3 entirely different physical states coexisting in perfect harmony in one fluid. How cool is that?
All right, part 3, major constituents and their roles.
So now that we know how everything is physically suspended, let's nail down exactly what these dispersed and emulsified components actually do in practice. Let's start with lactose. Lactose is the key carbohydrate, the milk sugar, and it exists solely in that true aqueous solution we just talked about. It's absolutely essential. It provides energy, and technologically speaking, it's exactly what bacteria ferment to yield lactic acid. That's what makes cultured dairy products like yogurt and cheese even possible. But biologically, it's kind of a paradox for us, because many human adults eventually lose the ability to easily digest it, which leads to widespread lactose intolerance.
Next up is the milk fat, or the lipid phase. These exist as an emulsion of tiny globules. Now, what's really fascinating here are the minor constituents that actually protect these globules, specifically phospholipids like lecithin. Lecithin is this crucial emulsifying agent that heavily contributes to that characteristic richness and flavor we associate with milk. Just be warned, though, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's highly sensitive to oxidation, which can sometimes cause those weird metallic off flavors you might have tasted in some dairy products.
Then we've got the proteins, which sit in that colloidal dispersion. This is a super interesting split in scale. On one hand, you have caseins. These form very large colloidal aggregates, we call them micelles, that can range anywhere from 50 to 600 nanometers in diameter. Casein makes up the vast bulk of the protein. But alongside them, you have the whey proteins like lactalbumin and lactoglobulin. These are much smaller, existing practically at the molecular level, suspended in the serum.
So to pull this all together, lactose brings the energy and the potential for fermentation. Lipids bring dense energy and rich flavor. The ash, or mineral matter, things like calcium and phosphate, provides the literal building blocks for bones and teeth and strongly influences the fluid's overall physical stability. But the proteins, they might just be the most dynamic element of the whole shebang. They aren't just there for muscle building, they provide vital non-nutritional physiological functions. We're talking carrying immunoglobulins, enzymes, and growth factors straight from the mother to the newborn.
Which brings us to our final section, fractionation and modern uses.
This is where we pivot from the raw evolutionary biology of milk into pure human ingenuity. We're looking at how we physically extract and utilize these microscopic components today. Because, let's face it, we don't just drink milk anymore, we dissect it. One of the absolute game changers in dairy technology is fractionation. By using advanced technology like microfiltration and ultrafiltration membranes, we can physically separate milk into highly purified fractions. And what's incredible about modern microfiltration is that it allows us to extract things like native whey straight from skim milk. This completely bypasses traditional cheese making. That means the protein isn't altered by rennet enzymes, starticultures, or pH changes. It's just a pure, unadulterated functional ingredient.
And we use these isolated components for a massive array of commercial and health applications today. We use them for specialized infant formulas, making sure we get the exact right ratio of carbohydrates and demineralized proteins. We rely heavily on them in clinical nutrition products to support the malnourished or folks recovering from severe illnesses. And of course, we isolate micellar casein and whey protein concentrates for muscle recovery and weight-reducing diets. We are literally taking apart that three-ring circus we talked about earlier and putting every single individual performer to work.
There's a great quote from our source material that points this out perfectly, noting that compounds like lactoferrin and immunoglobulins are now being marketed as nutraceuticals. We have moved so far beyond treating milk as just a basic foodstuff. The dairy industry is actively exploiting the bioactive components of these proteins for highly specific physiological, medicinal, and nutritional therapies.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. We started out today by noting that milk is a fluid that's perfectly biologically engineered for the specific newborn of a specific species, whether that's a gray seal, a polar bear, or a cow. But humanity has learned to masterfully reverse engineer this tailored elixir, carefully separating its solutions, colloids, and emulsions to fuel global human benefit and medical innovation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible biological systems are out there, just waiting for us to understand how to unlock their individual parts? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.